What's up, everyone? Welcome to the episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I am your host, Neil Horowitz. Hit me up on Twitter, NJH287, also on LinkedIn. We can find more content. The website is dsmsports.net. We can find everything related to me and the podcast and more content. And of course, the podcast is available on whichever podcast platform is your favorite in both audio and video modes. Such a cool show for you guys today. I really enjoyed this interview. It felt really high level, really stuff that that true leaders of sports organizations are thinking about and should be thinking about. My guest on the podcast today is Shripal Shah. He is the Chief Digital Officer for Next League and also author of Unlocking Fan Loyalty from Frequent Flyers to Fanatics in the Age of AI. So well-known author, well-known thought leader in the space. He also, if you are a subscriber to John Wall Street's newsletter, you have likely read some of his columns about AI in sports. No one really knows this stuff better than Shripal. And as you'll see today in the interview, just tremendous insight into how to think about integrating AI into sports, what he's seeing right now, what we should be thinking about, as well as, of course, a deep dive on the about the book he just wrote about, which is loyalty programs, loyalty and rewards programs, what's happening in and out of sports. Shripal brings a really interesting perspective, having worked in sports as well as in retail, which in many ways is far ahead of where sports is when it comes to loyalty programs. And it's a really cool insight into where this can all go and how we can start to really, create opportunities for fans to get rewarded for spending outside of the sports teams and with their sports teams as well, and really uniting sponsors, partners, and creating these really rich ecosystems where you're capturing more data, increasing lifetime value of your fans. Just so much good insight here. As you can tell, I'm already effusive because it really is awesome. So here he is. Here is Shripal Shah, Chief Digital Officer of Next League and author of the book Unlocking Fan Loyalty from Frequent Flyers to Fanatics in the Age of AI. Listen up or watch. Here's Shripal. I am back on the podcast with today's guest. I'm so psyched to be talking to him. I've been reading his work for years and just has a wealth of knowledge and expertise to share with us. My guest on the podcast today is Shripal Shah. He is the Chief Digital Officer for Next League and also the author of a few books, but the most recent book being Unlocking Fan Loyalty from Frequent Flyers to Fanatics in the Age of AI. Tons of good knowledge, and thanks for coming on the podcast today, Shripal.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be. I'm really appreciative of you having me.
Hell yeah, really psyched to pick your brain, putting together notes for this pod and looking back at all your great experience and all the knowledge you have to share. I'm so thrilled to be able to learn from you today. Before we get into the meat of our discussion, tell us about you. Give us an idea of your career path, your stops along the way, what you're doing today, and any tips for folks that want to try to do what you do.
Sure. So I've been fortunate to sit at that intersection of sports, tech, and marketing now for about 20 years. I'm getting old. My journey started before sports. I was in digital, like working for digital agencies and e-commerce. So most recently, I was at barnesandnoble.com, like
Mhm.
prior to getting into sports. And then I sort of accidentally fell into a role with what was then the Washington Redskins, now Commanders, where I helped them transform digital from being an afterthought to being one of the top two revenue drivers in the NFL. From there, I moved into the agency side, worked for a PR agency called Catalyst, where I was the chief digital officer,
Mhm.
helped build their digital and social media practice early 2010s, 2012. They get acquired by IMG. I get recruited to come back to what was then the Redskins as chief strategy officer, um, and got a chance to really drive broader marketing and revenue strategy and activation. Did that, and then from there I moved into the tech and startup world, working for a company called Moco Social Media.
Mhm.
It was an Australian mobile apps and media company. We were public on the ASX and Nasdaq, so it was like pre-SPAC. So that was kind of interesting, like a public startup.
Yeah.
But we had an app that was a iTunes top 25 app in sports that was being used by 1,280 colleges. We were the official app for kids who play intramural sports. Scaled that to 1,000,005 users.
Wow.
We had a running website that I sold to Ironman, a political website that I sold to uh, uh, Media Matters LLC.
Mhm.
So it was an interesting ride. And then I went to a company called Kiwi Tech for a hot second, and
Yep.
then I was at Shop Your Way for about 7.5 years, where we drove, a few $1 billion in credit card spend annually. But it was there where I got overwhelmed with the amount of AI because I was working with the parent company of Sears and Kmart, and I the amount of work that they're doing with data scientists, AI, machine learning, it was it blew my mind. And I was like, if I could have known what I learned there in sports, it could be really transformational.
Mhm.
And seeing that Sears went from 1,800 stores to five from the time they filed for bankruptcy to when I left last year, and they're still generating just under nine figures in revenue directly attributed to loyalty. I'm like, there's really something here.
Yeah.
And that led to a journey where I started publishing one of the first two books on AI and sports. I started writing a column for a website called John Wall Street on AI and sports. And that led me to Next League, where I'm now chief digital officer, where I'm helping leagues and teams harness AI and digital transformation to really grow revenue and deepen fan loyalty. Um, so it's been kind of interesting starting from like retail, going into sports where at the time people were trying to figure out websites and e-commerce. That really helped me going back into retail where I kind of got learned about how to really drive scalable loyalty programs and AI,
Mhm.
and now back to sports, and I think it's interesting because 20 years ago there were a lot of teams that had loyalty programs. I remember working for what was in the Redskins and ripping out loyalty programs, right, that we
Yep.
had and then 3, 4 years ago they're starting to come back, but they're still not at the level of what you see with um, Marriott, Bonvoy, or
Yeah.
Delta. These loyalty programs are driving billions of dollars in revenue. And I think about loyalty, like when you're like in the case where I just most work, Transformco, like you go from 1,800 stores to five, and you still are driving billions of dollars in transactional spend, and just under nine figures in profits. That's almost like fandom. So if you are now a sports team with this lifelong fandom, how do you really make loyalty um, that type of revenue driver, especially within the age of AI? And that kind of led me to write the book, which was on the basis of some columns I started for John Wall Street late last year that started getting a lot of interest. And I was like, well, if this is really resonating, maybe we can turn it into a book. And that's kind of what led to the book.
Hell yeah. It's such a cool journey and a really interesting like, perspective for you to be able to experience different in and out of sports. I want to like ask a few big picture questions into that end actually, which is like uh, first, I guess, from a digital perspective and digital marketing and getting someone to engage with you in those digital realms, whether it is in a shopping perspective or getting books at Barnes and Noble or like engaging with their favorite sports teams, like is digital strategy a pretty consistent thing where UX is UX and those things can apply across sports, or is it different when I'm shopping, I have an intent to buy something, whereas in sports I might be going with a different type of or different types of intents. Maybe one person might want to check the stats, another person might want to check the schedule, and someone might want to buy tickets. So like, do you find that the behaviors and strategies that work outside of sports in a more quote unquote traditional consumer ecosystem do translate across verticals like that?
Um, I think when we talk about like product marketing, UX and those areas where you started, there's a lot of similarities, right, between retail, sports. When you talk about driving marketing campaigns, from like a brand marketing campaign and growth, I think there are a lot of similarities. I
Mhm.
think the one area where the strategy changes, which I think sports could adopt towards, is retail is much further ahead in this idea of like true personalized marketing, like use of personas, segments, data enrichment. And in retail, there's a concept called RFM marketing, recency frequency marketing, and it's an approach and a framework to drive uh, people to not only based off this idea, right? How recent have they shopped with you or interacted with you? How frequent, and the monetization, and it really touches on this idea, not just going from aware, awareness consideration to purchase. But this idea of like, how do you really create higher lifetime value from your customers? How do you create a higher share wallet or a higher spend? And I think that concept is starting to emerge in sports with mixed use development being brought in, like the Battery in Atlanta, with more and more brands also wanting to know more about the sports fan, not the activities within the arena, but what are they doing away from it arena, or
Yeah.
like what's going on from when someone leaves their house until they walk into the arena and what happens on their way back. So so now you're really seeing that sort of change, which I think will lend itself to this other marketing approach. But I think that's where the real difference is. And when you're really driving for a retailer, you're going to look at an RFM marketing strategy once you get beyond like that small stages, once you're at a real scalable retail. Because at that point, you could have, like at Shripal, we had over 50 million users. You don't necessarily need to go acquire more users. You already have a lot of their info. You're always trying to get more people in the funnel, but if you can also retain those users and convert more people, spend more, that can also drive not only your top line growth, but better bottom line profits. And I think that nuance is starting to now show up in sports as you're seeing the advent of these holding companies that are now cross team, the insertion of private equity, and now with AI democratizing and bringing more of these mature marketing tools to sort of the budget levels of sports teams, I think that's going to also lends itself to really leverage those tools and those data sets and technology. It's going to lend itself to another marketing approach that I think ultimately could lead to a higher, like I said, LTV,
Yeah.
lifetime value for the fan base. So that's kind of how I see the space. But I think what you hit on, like from a UX, product strategy, growth marketing, like brand marketing, I think there are a lot of similarities. I think this is where the nuance, and then social media, of course, is very different in sports and for retail. But I think that's kind of how I see the similarities and differences.
No, it's really, I mean, my wheels are spinning a lot. There's so much good stuff in that. And I want to like kind of touch on that aspect of the way that sports and non-sports and the kind of juxtaposition goes about building those rich fan profiles that allow you to get to that level of personalization and understand your fans. And of course, I've been a Padres fan, for example, San Diego Padres fan since I was whatever, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. So the fan I was back then, my lifestyle, my income is different than it was today. So you are going across those lifestyles for sure. But I guess how have you seen the ability for teams to collect data, collect useful structured data, evolve in your time? I mean, going back when you first started with the Redskins to what you see today at and with your perch at Next League, meaning like I think early on and even still today to some degree, it's enter to wins. It's fill out this survey. To some degree, that they're starting to get better at uniting some of these data sources across what you're spending at F&B, what you're spending on merch, what you're spending to buy tickets, some of the secondary sales. As you mentioned, like trying to get into these more broader ways to collect fan data. And even for my area where we think about content and what kind of content you're consuming, if someone watches a given set of videos on social or engages with some content that is related to XYZ like areas, whether that's community relations or a kids club thing or something related to behind the scenes stuff. Like how are our teams getting better at collecting all this data from all these fan touch points, which are I would say are probably more numerous touch points than your typical retailer, maybe. And then actually putting that data into use, of course. So a long rambling way of saying like how have you seen the ability for teams in sports in general to collect data get better over the years? What does it look like today, and how good are we actually putting that data to use?
Yeah, I mean, I think early on, right, you just had people like just taking out their websites and emails, and they were just trying to basically just they would just send, right? It's like, okay, let's send today, let's resend 2 days from now, and let's just go, right? It was just like and they would just hit. It was like one email list. There
Right.
was no,
We
there was
all
no
got we all
nuance,
got the same email.
right? And some right, it was like there's one email list, and they just use it for everything. And back then, the KPIs were primarily clicks and impressions. But
Hmm.
I think over time, there was a learning in the industry, right, about it, about engagement, about comment, shares, deeper time spent was a better indicator, right, for like of for likely to buy tickets. So then, right, so you started seeing that, okay, you know what, these other things could help in. And then you were starting to distinguish, okay, who's in market versus out of market,
Yeah.
right? Remote fans versus who's likely to buy. And then that led to this idea like, can we now start thinking about propensity and predictability,
Hmm.
right? And that led to the natural, like, okay, let's create a central profile, these CDPs, let's start creating personas. And then that's what I think started lending itself to, okay, now you went from that single email list that was being used by everyone to now us understanding that these engagement points and these subtleties would lead to higher, you know, people are using things like predictability and, propensity. And they've created these different, it went from, one list to 10 lists to now using personas to dynamically create the list of where things are going. And I think the reality is people in sports are still across now all of those tiers. The high revenue teams seem to really be doing like the more mature stuff. You still have teams in, like on the MLS side, NWSL and others
Hmm.
that I would argue are still doing the marketing just like we did it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And then you have a bunch of folks kind of in the middle where they know they want to get to here, but the barriers could be cost, uh, tech debt, not having the staffing,
Hmm.
right? So therefore they're not there yet, right? I think if you were to map the landscape of sports, they're going to kind of fall into this level of buckets. But I think AI just kind of came and became a thing, right? And like I was talking with the major LLM providers, and they say it was almost like what they called an awakening. That this summer, demand for you know an LLM ChatGPT, OpenAI ChatGPT Copilot, the demand went up 1,000% this summer, which was more than the requests to buy, right, enterprise licenses in the prior 9 months or year combined. So
Wow.
that kind of like came over the top. But before that, when I first rejoined Next League and I was talking with CMOs, this idea of like creating a more mature marketing tech stack for personalization was really everyone's number one priority. And
Hmm.
I would think then some form of loyalty was usually like two or three. But right, there was so you were seeing people going down this route. I think now with AI mandates starting to come in, that's kind of like caused some stuff to just be paused. Others are doing all like go forward, all steam ahead. But now I think that, and some people I think are waiting to see how AI changes what their plan was, right, for the marketing approach and or their loyalty.
Yeah.
But it was interesting in January. If you had asked me this question, it was really clear. I had quickly called up a bunch of CMOs that I used to work with, 10 years prior before I kind of left sports, reconnected, and it was really clear. Our number one priority is that we got to create this marketing tech stack. We're investing because we want to, because they were doing at this point, a lot of the top revenue teams have multiple sports properties, multiple venues,
Yeah.
right? And they're like, we need this as our number one initiative because that's what's going to allow us to keep growing the revenue.
Hmm.
And it was about personalization, propensity, predictability, you know, going from like, you know, 40 personas to 400 to 4,000
Yeah.
to infinite, right? Like they had this idea where they want to go. And they were using sort of more what I call OG AI. But now this other, right now with everyone saying they want AI, what's really the case is they want generative AI
Right.
and how generative AI fits into the marketing tools, what I'd call OGAI, right? Like the
Yeah. Like
machine learning
machine
and like
learning. Yeah.
that, and how that fits in like this umbrella policy and how that affects operationally how these teams operate has kind of caused this weird shift that like legitimately I don't think you had a few outlines and forward thinking folks, but in the last 90 days, it feels like all of a sudden there's this groundswell, right, of everyone really trying to go down this route. And I think that's it's just kind of like it's not changing the importance of all these one, two, three, like if from the marketing stack and loyalty. But now people want to make sure that they have the AI pieces ready to ensure everything is sort of AI first as they move forward as an org. And I think that may lead to even faster adoption once people get back going, because I think that's going to ultimately lead towards um, more automation. Because what existed outside of sports was people already had marketing automation and workflow automation. That was the concept that no one ever invested in sports. And AI is going to, I think, really force that, because to really have good AI uh, products and workflow, you need to have good data governance,
Yep.
and you need to really focus on automation. And I think AI is going to sort of be the forcing mechanism to really should cause this level of maturity, because it's going to force the data to get better, the data governance and the data pristine will be solved. The people have looked at their workflows and their processes to figure out how they want to automate. So now when the AI comes in, it's kind of forcing, efficiencies across the board. And I think it's stuff that could have happened before, but it was only happening by a very small percentile of all the sports properties. And now you're going to see sort of a groundswell, which is going to then bring more parity between how sports teams go to market versus like what goes on in retail and like hospitality or in hotels. Your prior question, but I think this is going to lead to that.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get into the intersections of those in a bit. But I love, like, certainly it feels like we're in this next digital transformation for sports. Like, it felt like really early on there was maybe the onset of websites, and then you started collecting so much data. The old line used to be like, we're swimming in data, we don't know what to do with it. And then you finally get started to clean up data, and then mobile and social, and now and machine learning and AI. I guess when it comes to, I mean, it's maybe cliche to say like your LLM or your machine learning is only as good as the data you put into it. You mentioned data governance. We talk about the cleanliness of data, the structure of data, whatever term we want to use. How good is the ETL? Like how good is sports at capturing all the fan touch points that can give you data? I mean, I think coming from the content side and content world, like is a lot of the quote unquote engagement that's happening on an Instagram, on a mobile app, on name your social platform, is a lot of that noise, or is it possible to bring that data, that engagement data, that content consumption data into your CDP, into your system, so that you can then actually put it into action? Or is social content, what I'm doing on TikTok or Instagram, is that just not noise, but more air cover and getting people to get to the places where you can better capture their information and put that data to use?
I think people have always seen the value out of the social media metrics, right? And the content and the data. You didn't always have folks who could easily articulate the attributed value
Hmm.
out of that, other than knowing that when this happened, they would see an effect, and therefore
Right.
they kept doing it,
Correlation.
right? I think by having a uniform CDP and going down this process, creating fan journeys, as people are thinking of this idea of first party data, data enrichment, and then the layering, social content to then again create that deepened experience, more personalized experience for and then start measuring things like share a wallet and LTV versus just AOV. Again, not to learn buzzwords, so lifetime value, share a wallet versus average order or ticket size.
Hmm.
That is, I think, going to lead towards this no longer being noise, but a cog into this sort of broader view of the fan. I think the CM because so many CMOs have come into sports over post COVID outside of sports, there is this view that you've had CMOs that I know of even at baseball teams that did very mature um, media mix modeling with regression algorithms and all this data work, right?
Hmm.
And then they wanted to have this. So like you were seeing that at the highest levels. And so you started to see that. And I think the barrier was a lack of resources where they didn't have as many BI folks. Like people who couldn't do it didn't have as many BI folks, or didn't have as many engineers. They didn't have as many developers. The generative AI in some ways could, and the automation and these co-pilots and the co-pilot studios and the chat GPTs is some ways bringing the barrier down that I think is going to create a like not a full democratization, but it's allowing now it's brought the cost down in some ways where a lot of people are starting to be feeling like they can now move or they're getting ownership, private equity, investor buy-in to now make these investments. Where
Mhm.
earlier on, I think there would have been a question of like, well, why are we spending, $400,000 on this tech staff when we could just hire three, four other ticket people, right? Let's go hire
Yeah.
three, four ticket people at 35K each, fresh out of school. Why are we going to go spend $500,000, right? Like you would run into like those type of thinking as recently as a few years ago. And I think the AI discussion is now throwing that out the window, where it's saying, no, before you ask for people, what could be done with AI before you ask for headcount, right? Regardless, I don't think it's going to, AI is not replacing people, but it's forcing a new conversation, which is now forcing an investment into these other tool sets because the tools are going to help people do better work, more impactful work, more deeper work.
Mhm.
So I firmly believe it in some ways could create more opportunity, not less, but it's forcing a different discussion. Whereas before, the justification for the tools was always getting outshouted. People would look at it, yeah, maybe next year. We're not ready to take that $500,000
Yeah.
investment. And now, you know what? There, if you said we're going to go hire 20 people, that's going to get higher scrutiny right now than I would argue an AI first marketing tech stack. I think there's sort of a universal, not universal per se, but a maturation or view that if you were to poll a lot more people, you would find that that part of the conversation's gotten a lot easier,
Yeah.
and the staffing discussion's gotten materially harder. And all of it, it's kind of swung the other way a little bit, and that's forcing a different dynamic that has not existed in sports that I've ever seen in 20 years. Like I never even saw that in the original e-commerce website boom, right? Because at some point it's like this is getting too expensive. Leagues go take over and give us like free website systems, right? And then the
Yeah.
teams all just did that, right? So like here, it's like no, we're gonna make the investment, we're gonna keep it, we're gonna make it proprietary, we're gonna go build our own mixed use, we're
Yeah.
gonna use this to go make more money, and we're gonna keep more money. And so now we're making the investment, and that was not what I had heard back in 05, 06, 07 when owners were talking about their websites like, well, if I don't have to spend a million, million five a year on my website, and if the league's just going to give it to me,
Right.
God bless them, go right. And then when social media came, yeah, it's kind of fun. But right, it took a while before they really started seriously investing in that. It's like, oh, it's this free thing. I got 2 million likes. I'm just going to go use it for free.
Yeah.
And it took a good 5 years before it really started to sink in what the true value is that you need to invest in this and you need to build, for tools for this and you need to invest in like analytics and all of that, right? So as you look at like these curves, it's there, but I've never seen like this where it's like a universal, like, like this investment is like an easier discussion than it is hiring those 20 ticket reps. Like, right. It's
Totally.
like, why would you like it's like people are almost right, not appalled, but like these investors are really questioning, like, why would you even say that? And I think that's forcing a different view on the type of roles that might open up, the type of resourcing, because you're going to want roles and resources that can leverage these tools to then do that more mature marketing that you were focused on a little while
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, no, it's wild to think about the rapid evolution of how back in the day it was relationships, smile and die, and there still is it's smile and dial, and like there were days, it's not that all that long ago when teams did not control their own website, the league would take care of it, or even their social, and that was happening whatever 20 years ago, and here we are today. But when you think about like for someone who's on the front lines or sitting in that seat and making decisions about what we're investing in media, in content, in developing these all access hard knock style series or things that require significant investment. How should this new paradigm and these new opportunities fit into those decision-making frameworks of, hey, like it's worth us investing whatever budget to make this really complex content and pay two or three people to produce it and all the hours they're going to put into it. How should that enter the equation of, yes, this might not get the same amount of views if we just spent all day creating TikToks and driving a ton of views, quote unquote, or engagements even. How does that help us get better fan profiles? Help drive more to O&O. Help identify fans who have a longer LTV or develop them so they do have a longer loyalty with us for LTV. So like all that's to say, if I'm sitting in this chair and thinking about content strategy, thinking about what media I need to be producing, both for social, but really for all my fan touch points, media channels, how does this new frameworks, these new paradigms fit into those decision making frameworks?
So I think if we if we start with before, right? If you were to look at social media when people are doing it well, it was so reliant on the person. And what happens when that person left? They
Hmm.
got a better paying job. You would see a drop engagement, a drop in views because the next person didn't have it. And indeed, people weren't documenting, right, the techniques or,
Yeah.
right, like it. And it was also like there was a style. It could be that sometimes they were on camera, sometimes they weren't. But, right, like, so when you think of like an intern, when someone gets an intern, they're kind of green. They understand that. And people are putting in the time to train them, right? They train it, they get really good, they get into maybe indispensable. And then the intern may get a full-time job or they leave them.
Hmm.
But when that person leaves, either before that full-time or after, you then have to start from scratch. What people have to look at with AI models is it takes time. It takes a little bit of time to train, not as much time as a person. But if you spend that time to train the models, so as they get more nuance and it can close the gap, it stays with you, right? So I think, will it do everything that like creators do? No. But if it can take the most baseline content and almost make it indistinguishable to what someone used to spend 6 hours doing,
Hmm.
that someone now has 6 hours to go spend and go do more custom content almost in the role of a creator,
Yeah.
right? And therefore, the net benefit is that we're now getting the maximum value of that person, right? In terms of where we go. So while we didn't make the investment for getting a second person, let's use that, or maybe you did, right? It's like it's a sequencing of like if we play this out a year from now, 18 months from now, what's going to give us the best portfolio? It's right. It's like a portfolio view now of right. If you have AI generated content, human based content, what does that mean from a quality, from a reach, from a volume point of view? And you almost start thinking of that like I think how it's a poor analogy, but probably a similar analogy of how, a private equity person would think of a portfolio view of investments, right? Or a VC. They know that some are going to be hits, some are going to be misses, some are going to be singles, but they have a view and they always look at it, right, in the lens of the entire portfolio, right? They don't look at it in a single view.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be sort of the view of like when you think of content in the context of a portfolio view now of creator, human consumption, AI content generation, you're going to start thinking of things differently. And that can then lead towards different decision making as well. Right. And I think that's an evolution that that is going to feel painful, but I actually believe for some it won't. I think that's where messaging and culture need to be our key to kind of handle those short term parts of it because right there's angst and there's anxiety and these platforms are changing daily. But like if you'd make that, I think a year from now, you could be in a much bigger view. Like you just look at even things like image generation. A year ago, you typed in, create an image in ChatGPT, the text would be unreadable, logos would be distorted.
Yeah.
Now you look at GPT's gone better. You look at Google launching Nano Bananas,
Hmm.
and now you could upload two logos, give it any scenario, and the accuracy, you could argue, is as good as some graphic designers coming fresh out of school.
Hmm.
So while they may not be as good as these most senior designers, you could argue that some of the work that the AI is doing now has become as good as entry level. So that forces the human production to actually now have to step up, and they get to be right, or it frees up people to spend more time to create where the human content now has that nuance, the
Yeah.
details, right? The things there. So I think it's just sort of that view, right? Like the AI went from like illegible text, distorted logos to entry level faster than that graphic designer went to college, right? They went through 4 years to get to that point. The AI tools went to that in like 9 months or less. So right, so like when you take that sort of perspective, it's like the machine learning could, in theory, for some things, evolve at such a rate that if you do it now in 6 months, it's not iteratively better. It could be exponentially better.
Yeah. And ideally create content that it knows that you need to create based on the type of fans you're trying to reach or the type of platform that you're engaging on or the type of story that you want to be telling and should be telling. So it's a really I like the portfolio analogy. It really speaks to me as well around, yes, there's going to be some lower effort or like AI in enhanced content or AI facilitated content and some stuff that is, more human touch that requires a human touch as well. A few minutes left here. Shripal Shah, Chief Digital Officer for Next League and author of Unlocking Fan Loyalty from Frequent Flyers to Fanatics in the Age of AI. There's so much more that we're going to talk about here because I want to hit on more about AI applications in sports, but also I want to get into the idea of loyalty programs. As we've mentioned, they've been around forever. I guess first, just to set the stage, what is like how do you define a loyalty program? Is it the same as a rewards program? I feel like those get conflated quite a bit. And let's start with that. Then I want to go into where sports fits into the greater loyalty picture.
Um, can you say that one more time? Just
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you're
So
talking about
I just
sports and the greater.
looking at the difference between, or if there is a difference between a loyalty program and a rewards program.
Sure. So rewards are transactional, right? Buy this, get that. Loyalty is emotional. I stay because it's a part of my identity. Sports teams should design programs for both. And I think that's the awareness has occurred is like we want to give our fans both rewards, but we want to create a loyalty program that's going to play into the fandom, which is emotion, right?
Hmm.
And it's also an awareness that different fan types matter too, right? The better, the fantasy player, the player-driven fans, the
Yeah,
casual fans. So the successful programs are going to acknowledge those segments and ensure that it has value for all of those fans, both from a rewards point of view and from that emotional connectivity view that's going to ultimately create that loyalty, which then enhances the fandom. And it also gives the teams the ability to then get real data points to then describe and demonstrate that fandom and the value of that to their brand sponsors,
yeah,
which then ultimately should lead to higher revenue because then by being able to have the data and the proof to be demonstrative, that's going to ultimately lead towards more spend because then the sponsors can look at this versus other media channels and say, this is going to give me right a much deeper connection that's going to help me so that I'm not always having to reacquire my customers.
yeah.
I'm also building long-term customers at a much lower acquisition cost. So right, it creates like that flywheel effect.
Yeah. No, it's a great explanation of it. And where it, I'm part of several loyalty or rewards programs myself, and I'm sure everyone is. You mentioned, every sports writer I think swears by their Marriott points. There's Starbucks. There's even like credit card loyalty or rewards programs. Like is the ultimate future, or what are we heading toward? I guess even today, and what are we heading toward in the future of? Is there like I remember there was maybe an app called like the Spot app or something that was trying to be like a more centralized loyalty app that you can use at multiple retailers or merchants. Like is the idea that sports can be this central hub because we have partnerships that you can when you go and buy your groceries, there's the sports team is partnering with a certain grocer. Same with a ride share or a fast food restaurant. Or is it ultimately just going to be a this conglomeration hodgepodge of different programs. You're going to log into whichever app is the right app, depending on what where you're making your purchase or where you're spending your time. And if that is the case, does it not matter as much that these it starts with a sports partnership?
I think there's a realization people are not going to download 50 apps and use all 50,
Yeah,
right? I think the mobile space has evolved that people have come to recognize that, so they no longer put their hopes on just downloads, right? Paid download campaigns. I think we've seen it outside of sports that what's called open loop reward programs, the ability to actually spend and earn uh, points or value, not only in say a specific retailer's walls, but elsewhere, and then redeem elsewhere,
hmm
leads to more usage and a higher spend, right? There's data for this. If you think of, Bonvoy and United, Uber and Lyft working with, I believe, with the airline apps or the Amtrak app, right? It's already occurring and people are using that. And in that situation, people are able to connect their loyalty account from one program to the other. They earn points, and the platforms are all exchanging that almost like cash, right? But what they're doing is it's creating they're doing that because they've seen it's creating a higher spend across everyone. And it took a while for people to get that. And then in retail, people started expanding their points beyond just their four walls to make it available to, if they had their own credit card, right? You can earn points now at gas
right.
stations, grocery stores. And they started seeing a higher spend and a lower age rate, right? Sports are not there yet, partially because of, you have these 20, 30-year veterans selling sponsorships that are reluctant to like think that way, which
hmm
happen in other industries. So that may or may not change. You have then people who have yet to put the investment in on the tech side to do that. And that then becomes a thing where in sports loyalties is still thought of as just apps versus outside of sports, people think of loyalty as a centralized profile, points engine, and offers engine. And so you think of United, you can log into the United app and see your points. But if you went to the Bonvoy website, they may say connect with your United account. You're not going back to the United app. You're just typing your United account number, password. They just connect, and now you're getting the benefit, right? So those things work at web, they work at mobile web, they work in app, they work in at POS, they work on SMS.
hmm
So right, they're omni-channel, and to do so they're omni-channel, they're open loop, so meaning they work beyond just a single retailer or partner. They're cross currency. So that what that's done is it drove more value to the currency because now it can be, it has value at multiple places, which then creates higher liquidity because now there's more people are earning more,
Yeah,
but then they're also redeeming more.
yeah,
So therefore they're spending more. Now that drives higher potential frequency. The person that came twice a year somewhere might come three, four times a year without having to pay for acquisition costs. The person that came once a month might come 1.5 times a month.
hmm
And that is what everyone outside of sports has seen. I think at sports, when you have some leagues with only 8 home games, it's like, well, we didn't have enough metrics to do it. It's not worth investment. Okay. But now we're about to do an $800 million stadium renovation and we're going to do a mixed use development. All of a sudden, there's going to, okay, now people be coming here year round. Okay, now I'm going to make revenue, like the Braves did, where they found an incremental $65 million in less than 5 years
yeah,
by creating this. So now people look at that, wait a minute, if I'm getting, and they're going to get on pace to ultimately get incremental 100 mil outside of the actual stadium. I want that. And then I get the property value and the higher rent. So, so I think we're going to see this eventuality, and AI is starting to bring the cost of the technology down too.
hmm
So, I think it's just a matter of when, because these behaviors actually exist everywhere outside of sports, right?
yeah,
They exist. They exist in hospitality, transportation, restaurant apps, grocery stores apps. Like in your town, I'm sure you see like the grocery store and the gas station
Hmm.
allow you to like cross mingle points, right? That's pretty nationwide. So this idea of cross industry collaboration is happening at in industries and verticals that have much higher spend, right? People spend a lot more with their grocery stores and their gas because they need it
Right.
than they do with their sports tickets. People in some places could be spending more on travel because they're using it for personal and for work than
Yeah.
they are for their sports tickets. So it's just a matter of understanding market size and TAM. And I think it's an education. And I've had many conversations. Is one of the reasons why I also wrote the book. That's the premise of the book of like, this is a reality where like these for airlines, their loyalty programs are considered more valuable assets than their entire fleet of airplanes,
Yeah.
right? Like full stop. The little quote app, which is not an app, but that app in some people's mind is worth more than my entire fleet of airplanes.
That's wild. Is this like ultimately at first, at least, like a crawl, walk, run, like a domestic, more localized play to begin with? I mean, I'm sure, like you mentioned, the airlines and so these global brands are certainly going well beyond borders. But for us, for sports organizations, I think like what I'm getting at is this the ultimate promise of whatever FC Barcelona being able to truly start to monetize their hundreds of millions of fans around the world that they will boast about having, as opposed to let's focus on in Atlanta, let's focus on how can we maximize the our mixed use and our real estate and getting more fans, more butts and seats, more fans in the retail areas. Ultimately, is it first like let's focus on what we can do with less friction because it's easier to make partnerships with more American companies and less friction around than you would go if you're starting to think about global and all the fans that whatever Inter Miami might have now in Argentina because of Messi, let alone around the rest of the world. Like, is there a golden opportunity for monetizing these more quote unquote remote fans, the digital fans that may never set foot in your greater radius of your venue?
Um, I think there is. And I think that's also going to be the catalyst, right? I think you look at the NBA, like globally, and the European football clubs. I think the European football clubs have already embraced global fandom and they understand and they've created loyalty programs that appeal to fans they know that will never come right to the games in Europe. And you see a pattern there. I think the NBA has, while they haven't created a global loyalty program, they've embraced global content and global fandom better than most. And I think the NBA team owners that have these global superstars are right coming from Europe. They're starting to see that they need to find a way to take advantage of that, right? And they're seeing the tourism and all these other things that are starting to come out of that. So I think when you look at clubs like FC Barcelona, who built a digital first monetization model, ownership groups that are operating across multiple clubs and cross pollinating innovation, primarily part of it is because Europe in general is probably more mature on the fintech side. US, right? Like, and that also leads itself to doing a lot of this from like a security, scalability, right, point of view. That it removes a lot of the friction to do that, right? But I think in some ways, right, the US market was slower to adopt a lot of the mobile standards than the European market. And that COVID sort of forced some of that. I think it's just a matter of time. And I think the properties that are trying to hit a global fan reach are not going to do a crawl, walk, run. I think they're just going to then eventually realize they got to make that investment because they see a window to go capture that global fan market before they might lose a player's prime years.
Yeah.
And they're going to want to make that investment. So I think everyone likes always for budgeting purposes say crawl, walk, run. But just like AI is coming over the top, where people are now making investments that they would have otherwise questioned even 6, 9 months ago, I think you're going to see a similar over the top mentality of like, wait a minute, we need to capture this global fan base. We're going to make that investment and we're not going to do a crawl, walk, run. We have a minimum point that we got to start at. Because in reality, most of these owners are billionaires. So it's not like they don't have the capital.
Yeah.
So it's just a mindset. And I think when these owners are now coming in pushing that, and the pressure is starting to be felt as part of this AI piece, this is going to probably be the next domino to hit. Okay, what are you doing for AI? What are you doing to really capture a global fan base? What are you really doing to really capture more spend, right? Like, I think because they're going to see it everywhere else. So like it's just a matter of like where this is going to happen over the next like 2 years or 3 years, you know?
Oh, it's so exciting to think about. One last thing here before we get to a shareable stat. I could keep you all day, every day. This is just so awesome, Shripal. And that is like for an organization that is just trying to like sell in AI or at least get some quick and small wins or figure out what's like the lowest friction thing that I can do to really prove out like, oh, look at me, I'm using AI and it's delivering results. Like what are those like easy ways to get started for someone who is either not savvy or has a little bit of FOMO or just wants to understand like how my team can start to use AI to deliver some results.
I mean, the easiest way is to just get started, you know? I mean, I
Is
can
it
always
like
be funny, or
if it's enhancing my email marketing or making my content creation easier or creating workflows that save time? Like what are you seeing as like the first steps that when you're thinking about not necessarily digital transformation, but just integration of these new technologies?
I think you go to like what's going to motivate you to want to just like play with it, right? And I think, like for some, it's like taking an email. Can I like shrink it? Can I like, you know, help me, right? Take a long email thread and summarize it. Can I
Mhm.
like just get like basic productivity? And that's enough to get people curious. For others, it's like, I need help with, creative ideation, brainstorming.
Yeah.
For others, it's like, you know what? I really suck at creating graphs and visualization. So now I'm using AI to do that for me. And or other people want to play with image creation. You have to find what I think people's motivations are. But I think it's like there has to be a level of education of like the do's and don'ts,
Mhm.
like don't upload a spreadsheet of like people's personal information and like do it. Make sure you don't use a personal email. Like, I mean, we're doing it at home is one thing, right? But if you're doing for work, it's like probably make sure you have a corporate email and you use the AI platforms that your corporation wants. Don't like upload sensitive data, right? But you could start with that are like public facing. I always tell people take stuff on a website or Sales Cloud
Mhm.
and ask it to do things there, right? That's usually fairly safe because if it's on a website, it's already being seen by millions of people. You
Right.
could say take that and translate it, take that and summarize it, take that and turn it into FAQ, right? So that gets you reps. But I think ultimately people have to find something that's going to, like I said, get them they see an immediate value. It drives some level of curiosity, so they go deeper. So they start really exploring. And that's going to ultimately then create that aptitude that they can then apply elsewhere. So
Yeah.
it could be something that's work related. It could be something that's personal. You know, um, like one of the things I did was I always encourage people to use it in all aspects of their life, right? I've been on record like there are times, right? It's like Friday, right? Today's Friday. And people are like, okay, there's only a few things left in the groceries, in the fridge. I haven't gone to the grocery store yet.
Right.
Do I just tell Chat GPT, hey, I've got these 5 things, give me 3 recipes under 30 minutes or less, like the style of celebrity chef XYZ.
Yeah.
It'll give you some recipes. Oh, that was great. It saved me 2 hours of trying to figure this out. I didn't have to drive to the store, right? I could just get it and go. Or it could be that I used it to manage, carpooling for my kids' travel soccer team,
Mhm.
or I did it for, you know, a quick spreadsheet, right? Because I suck at making it. I just sort of gave it a raw email thread of a bunch of notes and it turned into a spreadsheet, like a grocery list,
Yeah.
right? Or I turned it so like once people start finding that passion point to go, I think the uses now are endless. And once they see that, it kind of becomes like this like light bulb moment. And then you see people settling into, okay, I'm going to start thinking about using this because now I know that the extra 3 minutes I spent on the first try are going to start saving me 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour for every other try. And I think once the light bulb hits for people, that's what really drives them forward.
Yeah.
Whereas for social media, it was kind of the same thing. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think anyone's gonna really do this Twitter thing. Where are we? I don't want to be on this face smash thing or whatever. And then all your friends and family were on Facebook. Oh, we need to get on there. Well, I don't know about this Instagram thing. What do you mean photo filters and things? Oh, well, now everyone's on Instagram. Okay, I'm gonna get on Instagram, right? I don't know what this Snap thing is. Like I don't understand that these disappearing things. Well, all these kids are on Snapchat and it drives really cool short form content. Okay, I'll go check it out, right? Like so with content, you had similar barriers, and it might take a really long time before it was like a critical mass that then almost created peer pressure to get you to go. I think this case is very personal.
Yeah.
People are going to see it. They're going to see it saves them time, and they're going to go jump in where you don't need that social sort of family or friends peer pressure to really push you onto something. I think in this case, people just have to see it. And once they see it, it's like a moment of magic that then forces you to want to like go deeper.
Yeah, I mean, there's some level of anxiety of like I should be doing this more because everyone says you should be using AI to make your job better and make your life easier. But everyone has to figure out like what's the areas in the sandbox I'm going to play in, and whenever you hit a dead end, like how can AI help you get out of that? I mean, one small example that maybe it might not be an example, but I see it all the time. Major League Baseball, every night they will share a montage of home runs hit that day, and they always have a clever caption to go with it. And I'm like, holy crap! Like, how tough is it to come up with 162 or however many days there are of games to come up with a clever caption for this home run montage? I'm like, you know what? They could probably easily have a ChatGPT go back and forth with them to give them as many ideas as they could ever think about for clever ways to introduce a home run montage. And so I think it's whenever you have an opportunity to ideate, to use previous data to inform new ideas or new ways to get through things, it's exciting to see the different use cases that will continue to come out and just starting getting those small wins to get you that confidence to continue to do more with it. But this is
Absolutely.
fun, Shripal. We'll have some more fun in our quick hitting question segment. First up, shareable stat coming up right now. Just awesome, awesome stuff from Shripal Shah. I feel like I'm a hell of a lot smarter having listened to him answer some of these questions and giving some of his great wisdom and insight. It will not surprise you to know that he's also a professor. He does teach at Georgetown University in addition to his roles with Next League and authoring books and columns. Just really smart stuff, and we're gonna have some more fun with them with our really quick hitting questions this time around, but some more good stuff there. But first episode's shareable stat. And so the share with that comes from a really extensive study done by Meta recently, a survey of sports fans that use social media or not, and how they engage and what they use social media for. I shared the whole study on my LinkedIn, so check out a post there. Really worthwhile to go through all 50 plus pages of the presentation. But some stuff I pulled out, and one thing I'm going to share for the shareable stat today is 37%. And they looked at why what fans want out of their social platforms, or why fans go to Meta for content. And number one, the top three, not too surprising, over two-thirds of fans were going there for highlights, for live games, and for news and updates. But when you start to go down the list a little bit of what else resonates, whether it's memes or hype videos or stats or UGC, those are not the next ones. The next ones down are behind the scenes content. Maybe not too surprising. 37% of fans said behind the scenes content and condensed games. Another 37% of fans said condensed games. So that means more than hype videos, which we spend a lot of time in production on, but those are still meaningful. More than memes, which again it seems like they're omnipresent. More than UGC, more than stats, more than just team posts or athlete posts even. Fans are going to get this behind the scenes content and condensed games. So what does that make you think about? It makes you think about, yes, of course, highlights and live games and news are going to be the top three. Will be the top three for the foreseeable future. I'm guessing if we do this survey again in a year, 2 years, 3 years, who knows? But how do we think about the idea of fans getting more condensed games, more behind the scenes, more ways to pick apart and package and present what's ultimately the product, which is the games? So how can you start to think about, what are other ways we can present game footage or coverage of games, and how can fans consume this, especially if they're not watching the full live game, which of course younger fans are not sitting down for 3 hour blocks and watching a full live game. Hence the idea of highlights, but they still being able to have that storytelling element within it. hence the condensed games and the behind the scenes to some degree as well. Hey, I already saw this. I want to see a different way of looking at it. Or the condensed games aspect of, oh, I didn't see this, but I don't just want the actual play. I want to see the narrative. I want to see, did the team come back? Were there some pivotal moments? Were there some clutch plays? Were there some some interesting storylines that emerged during the game? So how can you make sure that is coming across? And maybe condensed games, we see that a lot in the NBA. If you go to their YouTube channel, their condensed games consistently get a lot of incredible view counts and incredible engagement. Other leagues as well are starting to play around a little more with condensed games. So it's really worthwhile to sit down and think about how can we serve the audience that's coming to us for, yes, the live games and highlights, but something beyond that. And we are spending a lot of time thinking about humor and memes and hype videos and stats and all that, which is all very good still and very shareable. But how can we also, do a little bit less with a little bit more? Condensed games are not going to take as much production value necessarily as a hype video, but they serve different purposes and can serve different masters and serve different fans and even develop fans more into more avid fans. So worthwhile to think about. I won't go ramble on longer because we have some more fun coming up with Shripal Shah. But again, that shareable stat. The top three things that fans are going to meta for is highlights, live games, and news updates. But coming up next is behind the scenes and condensed games tied at 37%. So interesting. Think about it, talk about it, ponder it. And more importantly, stick around for more of the Shripal Shah of Next League and, of course, his books and columns on loyalty programs and AI. Back from this episode of Shareable Stat, I'm joined once again by Shripal Shah. He is Chief Digital Officer of Next League, also author of the recent released book, Unlocking Fan Loyalty from Frequent Flyers to Fanatics in the Age of AI. Shripal, you kicked ass in your interview. Are you now ready to do some quick hitters?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, number one. You mentioned working at Barnes& Noble earlier in your career. So Barnes& Noble is kind of having a nice little comeback these days. What do you make of their revival, and like, what do you think has allowed them to sort of make this comeback?
They lean into community and differentiated experiences.
I like it. All right, these are going to be the quickest hitting quick hits we've done before. So, number two, the most memorable content or campaign from your time with the Washington Redskins.
We did a vote the Redskins ticket presidential campaign for the Pro Bowl with Sonny Jurgensen and Sam Huff. And at one point with the fan vote, I think 10 out of the 13 starters or 11 start 10 out of 9 out of the 11 starters, it's been a while, were actually Redskins players because we literally had lawn signs and bumper stickers, and it
Wow.
turned into this thing where they clearly had to then push everything else to then fix it. But at one point, we were literally leaning in one area. So that was a really, it was during a presidential election year, and we were in DC, obviously, but it was something. And there were there's such great Hall of Famers and
Yeah,
personalities, and so seeing that just created this crazy dynamic that it was like right pre-social media.
right.
It still kind of created what was like a viral moment without having social media, because this was like 2008.
That's so cool. What a great you broke the system. Number three, what is it like writing and publishing a book? Like, just is it hard? Like, how do you get it? How do you get started with that?
It's like running like a season, right? Like it's planning long nights, right? And then you're trying to like go from an outline to iterations, and you just got to grind it out, and it's a process. But then, right, seeing people engage and react to it is always rewarding. So it, it's very similar to like planning for like a season in a lot of ways.
Oh, I tip my cap to you. It's a great undertaking. You serve and provide a lot of knowledge. Number four, tell me, throughout your life, it can be work or not for work, the most memorable game you've ever been at.
Um, Probably '04 Yankees Red Sox ALCS, when the Red Sox started slowly mounting their comeback.
Oh yeah.
So I think that was it. I think it was last row, third baseline.
Oh wow.
But yeah, hard, partially view. But yeah,
Definitely hard to beat that. That's incredible. Number five. You don't have to pick a favorite, but we'll see if you have one. Which LLM tool? There's plenty out there. There's Claude, there's ChatGPT, there's Gemini, there's Copilot. Which LLM tool is your favorite to use and why?
sure. Chat GPT for speed and creativity, Claude for depth, Copilot for enterprise integration for like Outlook suite, security, scalability. I think
Yeah.
Copilot really is driving a lot now.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of people do have like I use this one for this purpose, this one for this purpose, and it's interesting to play around them. All right, you mentioned about spending time with Moco as well as a little bit at Kiwi Tech, interesting companies where you build some cool stuff. So your favorite project or projects from your tenures with those companies?
Yeah, man, I think with Moco, it was really getting to work in the youth sports space, intramurals, getting to 95% of all D1, D2, D3 intramural programs. Seeing us go from a $40 CAC to under $2 in less than 18 months, scaling from 100,000 users to 1,500,000. And you know, and it was based off of going from B to C and seeing this light bulb moment of going B to B to C, where we started going after the rec directors. The
Yeah,
rec directors would mandate the app where they tell the students if you didn't download this, you couldn't play.
yeah.
And that just changed the ball game. So that moment of understanding this concept of B to B to C uh, was something that I then took elsewhere in my career from a marketing standpoint.
Love that one. And we can have a whole nother pockets episode on your review with youth sports and whatnot. All right, number 8, tell me the food question. Tell me the best meal to get in New York and where to get it.
Um, so I like Los Tacos numero one. I think there's one by uh, MSG Penn Station. There's another one in Broadway near Times Square.
I like it. All right, last one for you here. Looking ahead, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, however long you want to go. Okay, I know it's tough. What's one prediction you have about sports that you're particularly excited about?
I think fans are going to see ways to really personalize their content stream. So something that came up in the this event I was here at Columbia on the panel I was on. I think you're seeing now with streaming and broadcast rights going to streaming providers, it it now allows the ability to have multiple streams. People can pick what they want. Do you want a
Yeah,
data centric one? Do you want a creator stream? Do you want a second commentary team? What have you? And because the content's going to the clouds, you don't need multiple trucks. So I think what you're going to find in less than 10 years is as more and more of the media rights go to streaming providers, fans are going to be able to really personalize that content streams exactly how they want it. And that's going to lead to a very personalized in-home broadcast experience that wasn't probably even imaginable a decade ago.
love it. So exciting to think about. All right, Shripal, before you get out of here, it's your chance to shout someone out. Tell us an all-star follow. It can be a blogger, a podcast, or a Twitter follow, a LinkedIn follow, whatever. Tell us who they are and where they're following, and then we'll also want to know where to find you in your book.
Sure. I mean, I, you know, and again, I'm partial because I work with you really closely, but I think, what you see, I always love reading Joe Favorito, what he does. I like John Wall Street. And then I really like the research that Arctos has been pushing out on the sports side. So like that's something that I highly encourage people looking at because I think with all the changes, I think those are things that could be really valuable for folks. Um,
Yeah.
there's so those are areas I would definitely, from a written point of view, would highly encourage. I think, if you're looking at podcasts besides yours, which I should push, um, at my company Next League, we're interviewing lots of commissioners and C-level execs all across sports. I think you'll find some fascinating conversations
Yeah.
with our CEO Dave Nugent. So I would recommend that too.
Awesome. And how about you? Where can we find you, your book, and Next League across digital social media?
Yeah, I mean, you'll find some of my columns on John Wall Street. You can email me at Shripal at Gmail. I'm on LinkedIn. Um, I have a Twitter, Instagram, and then my books are on Amazon.
Check them out.
Hardcover, paperback, or Kindle. I think some of the Kindle ones might be even free right now. So
Check him out. He's full of knowledge, full of good insight. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us on the podcast today, Shripal.
great, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much again to Shripal Shah for his time and wisdom and insight today. Again, you can check him out. Check out his book, Unlocking Fan Loyalty from Frequent Flyers to Fanatics in the Age of AI. Read his stuff. Check out John Wall Street, where, again, he pens some columns on AI and sports. He's also, of course, Chief Digital Officer at Next League, which is a very reputable institution as well, and teaches at Georgetown. I don't know how he had time for me today, but I'm sure glad he did because I sure learned a lot. I hope he did too. That'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening or watching. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horwitz. Find me on Twitter, NJH287, also on LinkedIn, the website, dsmsports.net, and the podcast is available on whichever podcast platform is your favorite. Until next time, this is Neil Horwitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.